video, we're going to talk about factoring trinomials. And a trinomial, of course, means three things. Let's take an example. If we had x squared plus 8b plus 7, we would need to factor that into the product of two binomials. Well, one of the favorite ways of factoring something like this is to take the first coefficient, which in our case is 1. So we multiply the 1 times the 7, our third coefficient, and of course we're going to get 7. So we're looking for the factors of 7 that add up to be 8. So we're doing the factors of 7 that add to 8. So those factors, of course, would be 1 and 7. So we're going to use those two magic numbers, our 1 and our 7, to break up our middle term. So we're going to say that we have x squared plus x plus 7x plus 7. So now we've turned our three terms into four terms. So we're going to factor this now by grouping two at a time. So we take the first two grouped and we take the last two grouped. We're going to factor out the greatest common factor out of each parentheses. So out of our first one, we can factor out an x, and that leaves us x plus 1. And with our second parentheses, we can factor out a 7, and that leaves us x plus 1. So our greatest common factor is the x plus 1. So factored, we have x plus 1 times x plus 7. Okay, so let's do another one. So let's say that we had x squared plus 4x minus 12. So I need the factors of 1. Remember, our lead coefficient is 1. But 1 times negative 12. So I need the factors of negative 12 that add up to be 4. So let's see. Let's take a look here. 1 and 12, no. 2 and 6, yeah, that would work if we had a positive 6 and a negative 2. So let's try that. So if we have a positive 6 and a negative 2, they will multiply together to give us negative 12, and they will add up to give us our middle term of 4. So I'm going to break it up by saying x squared minus 2x plus 6x minus 12. Now please note that the 4x is the same as the negative 2x plus 6. So I haven't changed the value of this expression, I've just simply rearranged it a little bit. So let's group our first two. So our x squared minus 2x and we'll group our 6x minus 12. So our greatest common factor in the first parentheses is going to be x, and then that's going to leave us x minus 2. We can pull a 6 out of the second parentheses, and that will leave us an x minus 2. So our greatest common factor is the x minus 2. And that's going to leave us our x plus 6. Okay. So let's go ahead and try another one. So if we had n squared, we're going to change our variable, plus 11n plus 18. Okay, so we're going to take our lead coefficient, which is 1, times our last coefficient, which is 18. So we want the factors of 18 that add up to give us 11. Well, how about 2 and 9? So we're going to say n squared plus 2n plus 9n plus 18. Group our first two and group our last two. Our greatest common factor for the first parentheses is n, and then that leaves us n plus 2. And let's factor a 9 out of our second parentheses, and that will leave us n plus 2. Greatest common factor, once again, is n plus 2. And we're left with n plus 9 after we cancel out our n plus 2's. Okay, so let's try another one. So let's try maybe a y squared minus 13y plus 40. So we're looking for the factors of 1 times 40, which of course is 40. So we're looking for the factors of 40 that add up to be negative 13. So I'm thinking negative 5 and negative 8. So we're going to say y squared minus 5y, then we're going to have minus 8y plus 40. Okay, so let's group our first two. Now when we group the second two, I have to pull a sign out of there, so I'm going to pull a negative sign out. So when I pull a negative sign out, that's going to make the 8y positive, and it's going to make the 40 negative. Let's make sure you caught that. So if I were to distribute this minus sign back in the parentheses, I would get negative 8y, check. So if I distribute the negative sign to the negative 40, I get a positive 40, check. Okay, so we're good. Okay, so out of our first parentheses, we can pull out a y. That's going to leave us y minus 5. And in our second parentheses, we can pull out an 8, and that'll leave us y minus 5. Okay. So our greatest common factor, of course, is the y minus 5. And what's left will be y minus 8. Let's try x squared minus x minus 56. So we're looking for the factors of 1 times negative 56. That's going to add up to negative 1. Well, 7 times 8 is 56, so if the 8 was negative and the 7 was positive, when we multiplied them together, we'd get negative 56. When we add them together, we'll get negative 1. That sounds good to me, so let's do negative 8 and positive 7. As you can see, a thorough knowledge of our multiplication tables really comes in handy. So if you're trying to factor trinomials and you don't know your multiplication tables, you're really going to struggle. So now we have our x squared, we have our minus 8x, we have plus 7x, minus 56. So let's go ahead and group these guys. Let's factor an x out of our first parentheses, and that'll leave us an x minus 8. Let's pull out a 7 out of the second parentheses, and that'll leave us x minus 8. So x minus 8, of course, is the common factor. And that leaves us with x plus 7. So let's try x squared minus 15x plus 50. So what are the factors of 1 times 50? Which of course gives us 50. So what are the factors of 50 that add up to be negative 15? Well, I'm thinking negative 5 times negative 10. So those are the numbers I'm going to use to break up my middle term. Okay. Well, once again, when my third term has this negative sign, that's kind of a troublemaker. So I have to be especially careful when I see that. So when I'm breaking this up, I know I'm going to have a little bit of a head scratcher. I'm going to bring out that negative sign, and when I do, of course, that changes the signs of the expressions that I had. So I'm going to have a positive 10x and a minus 50. I'm going to factor out my x, and that'll leave me x minus 5. And I'm going to factor out my 10, and that's going to leave me x minus 5. So my common factor is x minus 5. And when I pull that out, that's going to leave me x minus 10. So let me try one more here. Let's try a v squared minus 7v plus 10. So here I want the factors of 1 times 10, which of course is 10, that add up to be negative 7. So I'm thinking we want a negative 5 and a negative 2. I'm going to break up this into my two components, and once again my third term is negative, so that's going to pose a bit of a problem. I just need to be careful so that I don't bring out the wrong thing. I'm going to factor out my v, and that's going to leave me v minus 5. Factor out my 2, and that'll also leave me v minus 5. So v minus 5 is my common factor, and that's going to leave me v minus 2. So that's a quick look at factoring trinomials where our lead coefficient happens to be 1.